In the teachings of Zen and Buddhist philosophy, it is said that you are not obligated to remain where you are not cherished. A lotus does not bloom in barren land. This powerful wisdom, rooted in the understanding of life's impermanence and the value of self-respect, provides a crucial lesson. Attachment to situations or people who do not value us can lead to suffering. There comes a moment in life when we find ourselves questioning our worth in the eyes of others. Have you ever felt invisible in someone's presence, as though your worth had diminished in their eyes? The sting of being undervalued is undeniably painful. We begin to wonder, what went wrong? Yet, this painful experience carries with it an invaluable lesson. True worth is not defined by others, but recognized within. This is the story of a seeker who, through rejection and silence, discovered the profound power of self-respect and detachment. The seeker had spent years living in a serene environment, surrounded by natural beauty, offering kindness and wisdom to those around them. They had devoted their life to helping others, offering time, knowledge, and care without expecting anything in return. But over time, something began to shift. Those who once sought the seeker's guidance now seemed to ignore them. The once appreciated wisdom was taken for granted. The seeker's kindness was no longer valued, and their presence no longer seemed significant in the eyes of those they had helped. Slowly, the seeker started feeling invisible. Heartbroken and confused, the seeker turned to their teacher for advice. The teacher was a master in Zen philosophy and had seen many such journeys. With patience and compassion, the teacher listened to the seeker's concerns. After hearing their plight, the teacher asked a question. When you pour water into a cup that is already full, what happens? The seeker, perplexed by the question, replied, "It overflows." "Exactly," said the teacher. "You are pouring your energy and worth into a space that can no longer contain or appreciate it. The time has come to reclaim your essence and redirect it wisely. Recognize your own worth." The teacher's words stung, but in that moment the seeker began to understand something profound. Their worth was not dependent on others' recognition. It resided within them. The pain of rejection, though real, was not an attack on their value. It was a reminder that some spaces are not meant for us to fill. As the seeker reflected on the teacher's words, the master shared a tale to help deepen their understanding. Once, a pearl of unparalleled beauty was discovered. People marveled at its perfection and clarity. Over time, however, the pearl passed from hand to hand, and its value was forgotten. People began to treat it as an ordinary stone, discarded and ignored. The seeker asked, did the pearl lose its worth, or did the people lose their ability to see its brilliance? The teacher smiled and replied, the pearl never lost its worth. It was always valuable. The problem was not the pearl, but those who failed to recognize it. Just like you, your worth does not change based on how others perceive you. It is always within you. The seeker understood the metaphor. Their self-worth was never diminished by others' inability to see it. Worth is intrinsic, carried from within, independent of others' opinions or judgments. But that realization came with the understanding that if we stay in spaces where our worth is not recognized, we waste our energy. The first step in reclaiming peace, the teacher explained, was to stop seeking validation from those who no longer valued them. This was not a call for vengeance or anger. It was an invitation to rediscover their own power, to let go of attachment to the approval of others. The teacher's words echoed in the seeker's heart, reclaim your essence, direct it wisely. And so, the seeker decided to take the first step in the process of reclaiming their own worth. They would stop offering their wisdom, their energy, and their presence to those who no longer valued it. The seeker began to realize that true self-respect comes from recognizing when it is time to step back, to retreat, to focus on their own growth. In doing so, they would learn the power of silence, the strength of detachment, and the peace that comes from honoring their true self. As the seeker embarked on their journey of reclaiming their essence, a profound realization began to settle within their heart. Detachment is not about abandonment, it is about freedom. For so long, the seeker had been bound by the chains of attachment to people, approval, recognition, and even expectations of their own life. They had believed that their purpose was to give without limit, to serve endlessly, and to be the one others turn to in times of need. But the lesson of detachment showed them a different truth. True peace comes not from attachment to external outcomes, but from the freedom to live according to one's inner truth, regardless of the approval or disapproval of others. The seeker reflected on the teachings of the Buddha, who had often spoken of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path as a means to attain freedom from suffering. The first step, the Buddha had taught, was to acknowledge the reality of suffering. Life as it is comes with inevitable pain and loss. We are not immune to it. The second truth, however, spoke of the cause of suffering: attachment. We cling to things, our relationships, our possessions, our desires, and in doing so, we bind ourselves to suffering. The seeker had been clinging to approval, clinging to validation, clinging to the idea that their worth was determined by others. But the moment they began to detach, the weight on their heart began to lift. This detachment was not cruel or cold. It was a gentle releasing of what no longer served them. It was the act of acknowledging that their life and their worth were theirs alone to cultivate. To better understand this, the seeker turned to the practice of meditation, a practice that had long been used in Buddhism to cultivate mindfulness and self-awareness. Sitting quietly in the presence of nature, the seeker focused on their breath. With each inhalation, they breathed in peace and calm. With each exhalation, they released the thoughts and attachments that had been weighing them down. Over time, the seeker began to feel a deep sense of inner stillness, a sense of spaciousness within their mind and heart. This space, they realized, was where true wisdom arose. In their practice, the seeker found that it wasn't the absence of attachment that brought peace. It was the presence of mindful detachment, which allowed them to be present to the world without being consumed by it. They began to see that attachment to external outcomes, whether relationships, achievements, or recognition, only led to suffering. True freedom was found in the ability to witness the ebb and flow of life without becoming ensnared by it. To illustrate this deeper understanding, the teacher shared another parable. Once, there was a great river that flowed through the land, its waters fresh and powerful. The river was proud of its strength and its ability to nourish the land it passed through. But one day, the river encountered a large boulder blocking its path. Initially, the river tried to push against the boulder, but the boulder was immovable. For days the river struggled, growing frustrated, exhausted, and angry. It had always prided itself on its ability to flow freely, but now it felt blocked and helpless. After much time spent in struggle, the river stopped fighting. It simply observed the boulder and the space around it. Slowly, the river began to flow around the boulder, finding its way without the need to fight or struggle. The teacher asked, "What do you think happened here?" The seeker reflected. The river learned that by not struggling against what could not be moved, it could find a way forward. "Exactly," said the teacher. The river was able to flow with the natural course of things by accepting the presence of the obstacle without attachment. The obstacle did not stop the river, it only taught it to move differently. Through this story, the seeker understood that the struggles they had faced were like the river's encounter with the boulder. They had been fighting against things that were out of their control, things they could not change. But now, by letting go of their attachment to these struggles, they could find peace and freedom. They did not need to force the world to conform to their desires. They could simply flow with it, adapting to life as it came. And so, the seeker embraced the practice of detachment with a heart full of compassion and patience. They stopped holding on to grudges, stopped trying to change others, and stopped seeking validation from places that could not offer it. The seeker began to realize that letting go is not about giving up, it is about giving in to the flow of life. They spent more time in nature, meditating and reflecting on the impermanence of all things. They observed how the seasons changed without resistance, how the flowers bloomed and withered in perfect harmony with the earth's cycles. The seeker began to embody this impermanence, understanding that nothing lasts forever. Everything is in constant flux, and attachment to the fleeting nature of things only leads to suffering. As they practiced this mindful detachment, the seeker's heart became lighter and their spirit began to soar. They learned that true strength is found in the ability to release, not to hold on. The more they let go of attachments, the more they opened themselves to the fullness of life's beauty, its joys and its challenges. The seeker had finally begun to understand. Freedom lies in the space between attachment and detachment, the space where you can stand still, fully aware of your own worth, without needing the world to mirror that worth back at you. As the seeker delved deeper into their path of self-discovery, they began to realize that detachment, though liberating, was not the end of the journey. It was merely the beginning of a new way of being, a way that allowed them to embrace the world without being consumed by it. It was through this new lens that they began to explore a crucial aspect of the Buddha's teachings: compassion. Compassion, the seeker learned, was not just about feeling sorry for others or offering pity. It was about understanding the shared human experience, the joys and the sorrows, the pain and the happiness, and responding with a heart full of empathy and kindness. It was about recognizing that everyone, in their own way, was on a journey similar to their own. In their own journey, the seeker had often found themselves consumed by the suffering of others. They had tried to fix people's problems, to ease their pain, to offer solutions where they were needed. But the seeker soon discovered that this desire to fix others was rooted in an attachment to control, an illusion that by solving others' problems, they would somehow find peace. But this only led to exhaustion and frustration. One day, the seeker found themselves sitting with a friend who was going through a particularly difficult time. The friend had been struggling with loss, and despite the seeker's best efforts to offer words of comfort, nothing seemed to help. The friend remained stuck in their sorrow, unable to move past the heaviness in their heart. Frustrated and helpless, the seeker withdrew into their thoughts. Why couldn't they fix it? Why couldn't they make the pain go away? The seeker remembered the teachings of the Buddha, which spoke of suffering as a universal experience. Everyone, in some way, experiences pain, whether it is the loss of a loved one, a setback in life, or an internal struggle. To be human was to experience suffering. But the Buddha had also shown that suffering, though inevitable, does not define us. It is how we respond to it that shapes our lives. The seeker turned inward and reflected on their own experiences of pain. They had known suffering too, heartbreak, failure, confusion. And in those moments, what had helped them most was not someone trying to fix them, but rather someone sitting with them in their pain, offering understanding and presence. At that moment, the seeker realized that true compassion was not about offering solutions, but about being present, being there for the other person, without judgment, without the need to change their circumstances. Compassion was about holding space for others, allowing them to feel their pain, without trying to rescue them from it. It was about offering kindness, not to fix, but simply to be a source of comfort and understanding. The seeker looked at their friend and asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" The friend nodded, and for the first time in days, they began to open up. The seeker did not try to offer solutions or tell the friend what to do. Instead, they simply listened with an open heart, without trying to interrupt or change the narrative. As the conversation continued, the friend seemed to release some of the weight they had been carrying. The seeker realized that sometimes just being present and offering a listening ear was more healing than any advice or solution could be. From this moment, the seeker began to understand that true compassion is not about fixing others, but about sharing in their experience without judgment, without attachment, and with a heart full of love. Compassion was not about absorbing another's suffering or taking it on as one's own. Instead, it was about recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings, seeing their struggles as a reflection of one's own, and responding with a heart that desired nothing but kindness. The seeker also realized that true compassion begins with oneself. The more they learned to be compassionate toward others, the more they began to cultivate compassion within themselves. They had often been hard on themselves, judging their own imperfections and flaws, but as they deepened their practice of compassion, they began to see that the path of self-compassion is the foundation for compassion toward others. One evening, the seeker meditated on the Buddha's teachings, focusing on the practice of metta, loving kindness. As they recited the words in their mind, they first offered kindness to themselves. May I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be free from suffering. At first, the seeker found this difficult. They had always placed others before themselves, often neglecting their own well-being in favor of others. But as they repeated the phrases, they felt a softening within their heart. It was as if, by offering themselves love and kindness, they were allowing their own wounds to heal. After a few moments, the seeker expanded their focus, extending metta to others. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be free from suffering. They thought of their loved ones, their friends, and even those with whom they had no close connection. The warmth of their intentions rippled outward, and they felt their heart open wider. But then, something unexpected happened. The seeker's thoughts turned to those who had caused them pain, people who had hurt them, betrayed them, or misunderstood them. They hesitated, unsure whether they could offer metta to these individuals. But the teachings of compassion urged them forward. Compassion is not selective, it reminded them. True compassion is all-encompassing. With a deep breath, the seeker repeated the words for those who had hurt them. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be free from suffering. To their surprise, they did not feel resentment or anger rise. Instead, they felt a sense of peace. They realized that offering compassion to those who had wronged them did not condone their actions, but it freed them from the weight of hatred and bitterness. It allowed them to move forward, unburdened, in a way that would not have been possible if they had held on to their grievances. From that moment on, the seeker learned that compassion was the key to breaking the cycle of suffering, both within themselves and in their relationships with others. It was the understanding that despite the differences between people, we all shared the same human experience of pain, joy, and impermanence. In learning to offer compassion to others, the seeker found that they were also healing themselves, one thought, one breath, and one act of kindness at a time. As the seeker's journey continued, they found themselves standing at a crossroads. The path they had been walking had led them to the profound realization that the root of suffering was attachment, the desire to hold on to things, people, and circumstances as if they were permanent, unchanging, or under their control. But the Buddha had taught that everything in life is impermanent, anicca, one of the three marks of existence. This truth struck the seeker deeply. It was clear now that their suffering had not been caused by the world itself, but by their attachment to it. They had attached themselves to material possessions, to certain outcomes, to the approval of others, and even to their own identity. But none of these things were permanent. They were all fleeting, like waves crashing on the shore, beautiful and powerful, but eventually receding into the ocean of time. The more the seeker clung to these things, the more they experienced frustration and pain when they inevitably slipped away. The seeker reflected on the Buddha's teachings on detachment. It was not about rejecting the world or becoming cold-hearted, as they had once feared. It was about seeing things as they truly are, impermanent and interconnected. It was about living fully in each moment, without clinging to the past or fearing the future. One day, while walking through a quiet park, the seeker came across an old tree, its branches heavy with leaves, swaying gently in the breeze. The tree seemed to embody everything the seeker had learned about impermanence. It had been standing for many years, yet its leaves would eventually fall, its bark would crack and weather, and in time it would return to the earth. But this did not make the tree any less magnificent. On the contrary, its impermanence made it more beautiful, more alive in its transience. As the seeker stood before the tree, they were struck by a realization. True freedom comes when we let go of our attachment to permanence. When we stop trying to hold on to people, experiences, and things that are not meant to last, we open ourselves to the beauty of life as it is, ever-changing and full of possibility. This was the ultimate lesson of the Buddha's teachings. The more we let go, the freer we become. When we no longer cling to the past, we are able to live fully in the present. When we release our attachment to outcomes, we can flow with the currents of life instead of struggling against them. When we let go of our need for approval, we can discover the freedom of simply being ourselves, without the need to be anything other than what we are. The seeker smiled as they walked away from the tree, their heart light and their mind at peace. They realized that the only thing they truly needed to hold on to was the present moment, the one thing that was always here, always available, always ready to be embraced. The seeker's path was no longer about seeking answers or searching for meaning in the external world. It was about letting go of their attachments to ideas, expectations, and desires, and allowing themselves to simply be. It was about accepting the impermanence of all things and finding peace in the ever-changing flow of life. As the seeker continued walking, they felt a deep sense of peace and freedom, no longer bound by their past, their desires, or their fears. They were free to simply be, to live fully, and to embrace the present moment without the need to control or possess it. The journey, they realized, had no end. It was a continuous unfolding of awareness, presence, and peace. With each step, they were letting go, opening their heart to the beauty of the world just as it is. And in that freedom, they had found their true home. As we come to the end of this journey together, I hope the teachings shared here have brought you a sense of clarity, peace, and inspiration. Remember, the path of wisdom is not about seeking perfection, but embracing the impermanence and beauty of each moment. It is a path of continuous growth, compassion, and freedom. If you found value in this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the Buddhist Wisdom channel. By subscribing, you'll be the first to receive more insightful content that will guide you toward greater peace, self-awareness, and spiritual growth. Together, let's continue to explore the timeless wisdom of the Buddha and bring these teachings into our everyday lives. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, may you find peace in every step you take. Namaste.